You can hear the muffled sob tearing through the quiet night. It's not a cry for help from an accident, but the whimpering of a broken heart. Inside the familiar bedroom, an elderly father trembled as he clutched an old photo frame. The picture was of his family 20 years ago, when his children were young, their eyes full of love and admiration for him. Now, those eyes had been replaced by coldness, even contempt. Today was his 70th birthday. He had prepared a lavish dinner, eagerly awaiting his children to celebrate with him. But time passed, and the dining table remained empty. Missed calls, unanswered messages. Finally, a short message appeared on his phone screen. "We're busy, Dad. Eat by yourself." Each word felt like a knife stabbing into his heart. This wasn't the first time. Lately, his children had become increasingly distant, indifferent, and disrespectful. Short, curt words, indifferent glances, broken promises. He felt like an outsider in the very house he had spent his entire life building. Pain and shame welled up, choking him. What had he done wrong? Why were the children he loved most treating him this way? This is not an isolated story. There comes a time in life when the relationship between parents and children begins to change for the worse. You spend decades raising, teaching, and sacrificing for them, but then one day, you realize something has shifted. Maybe they ignore your advice, maybe they disregard your opinions, maybe they speak to you as if you were incompetent, or worse, they make you feel like a burden, and that's heartbreaking. Are you experiencing similar emotions? Do you feel like you're gradually losing the respect of your loved ones? Don't worry, you are not alone. Please hit the subscribe button below and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss valuable insights that can help you change the situation and rebuild a good relationship with your children. We believe that with the right methods, you can absolutely regain the respect you deserve. This is not an isolated story. There comes a time in life when the relationship between parents and children begins to change for the worse. You spend decades raising, teaching, and sacrificing for them, but then one day, you realize something has shifted. Maybe they ignore your advice, maybe they disregard your opinions, maybe they speak to you as if you were incompetent, or worse, they make you feel like a burden, and that's heartbreaking. If your children have started treating you with less respect than you deserve, you might feel frustrated, even angry, and you might want to remind them of everything you've done. You've dedicated years to them, always putting them first. But here's the truth, anger won't fix the problem. In fact, it will make things worse. Instead, there's a more effective way to regain their respect without arguing or fighting. Today, we will explore 8 powerful ways for you to regain respect from your adult children. These are not just empty words of advice, but profound changes in the way you think and act, capable of completely transforming how they see you and your family relationship. Some things might surprise you, even go against what you once believed, but trust me, if you persevere, you will see a clear difference. Let's embark on this journey together, so you can reclaim your rightful place as someone cherished and loved in your children's lives. Way 1. Stop trying to seek approval from your children. One of the biggest mistakes parents make, especially as their children grow older, is trying too hard to please them. Perhaps you found yourself in this situation. You are willing to do anything to accommodate them, you agree even when you want to refuse, you put their needs above your own, hoping that if you do enough, they will appreciate you more. But here's a painful truth, the more you chase their approval, the more likely you are to be disrespected. Remember, respect is not built on blind self-sacrifice, but it arises from self-respect. If you always give in, always try to keep the peace at all costs, what you're really teaching your children is that your feelings and needs are not as important as theirs. And when they start thinking that way, it becomes easier than ever for them to look down on you. I once knew a woman named Margaret. In her youth, she was a strong and independent woman, always making her own decisions and living life on her own terms. But as old age approached, she began to let her children control everything. She was willing to change plans, rearrange her personal schedule just to meet their needs, silently endure disrespectful words, and even try to guess what they wanted to please them. She once confided in me that she only wanted to maintain harmony in the family, but what happened? Her children no longer respected her. They saw her as someone who always gave in, always agreed, always stayed silent. She thought she was keeping the peace, but in reality, she was losing her voice and her position in the family. If your children don't respect you, the first step isn't to demand their respect, but for you to stop pretending that you need their approval to feel okay. Start setting clear boundaries and learn to say no when necessary, even if you know it might upset them. Be bold in expressing your thoughts and opinions, even if they disagree. Because when you start respecting yourself and your own worth, your children will begin to see you in a different light, and over time, that respect will naturally return to you. Way 2, don't argue fruitlessly, lead by example with actions. When your children ignore your opinions, talk back to you, or treat you disrespectfully, your first reaction might be to argue back, remind them of everything you've done for them, and demand that they listen. But let me tell you one thing that will save you many years of frustration and pointless arguments. You cannot force someone to respect you by arguing with them. Think back, when was the last time you convinced someone to respect you by raising your voice and arguing? Respect doesn't come from empty words, it's built on your presence, on how confidently you carry yourself, on how calmly you react when others try to test your patience. If you respond to disrespect with anger or harsh words, you are only reinforcing what they already believe, that they have the power to control your emotions. I once knew a man named Frank, a retired teacher who had spent his entire life leading classrooms with confidence and authority. But when he came home, his grown children began to treat him like an afterthought. They ignored his advice, dismissed his concerns, and even laughed when he tried to correct them. Initially, Frank tried to argue back, trying to prove that he still deserved their respect, but the more he argued, the worse things became. Then one day, Frank decided to change his approach. Instead of getting into meaningless arguments, he started listening sincerely, trying to understand his children's perspectives. He stopped trying to chase respect with words and instead, he acted confidently and calmly like a man of value. He spoke calmly and with wisdom without needing to win every conversation. Gradually, his children began to realize that he was someone who didn't need their approval, didn't need to prove himself, but was simply a role model of inner strength. If your children don't respect you, don't confront them with fiery arguments to win it back. Instead, show them what respect truly looks like through how you treat yourself. Hold onto your dignity, speak with confidence and respect, and most importantly, don't lower yourself to their level of disrespect. Because when you stand firm with calmness and confidence, they will sense it, and over time, the way they treat you will change. Way 3, withdraw emotional dependence on your children. One of the hardest lessons you have to learn as your children grow up is that you cannot depend on them to fulfill your emotional needs. You can love them unconditionally and desire their love and respect in return. But the moment they sense that you need them to feel valued, the power dynamic in the relationship shifts. The truth is, even your own children respect those who are emotionally independent. When you rely on them for validation, attention, or love, it creates an invisible pressure on them. Instead of feeling grateful and loving, they may feel burdened and suffocated. They may start to withdraw from you, even treat you with impatience or even annoyance. And the more you try to chase their love and approval, the harder you make it for them to open up. I once knew a woman named Helen, a kind-hearted mother who had dedicated her entire life to caring for her children. As her children grew up and became busy with their own lives, she found herself constantly by the phone, anxiously hoping they would call. When no calls came, she would initiate them, often to the point of becoming a nuisance. She would frequently remind them how much she missed them and wished they would visit more often. But instead of drawing them closer, her actions pushed them further away. Her children began to see her calls as an obligation rather than something they looked forward to. Then one day, Helen decided to do something different. She stopped waiting, stopped initiating calls first. Instead, she began to focus on herself, finding new hobbies, going out with friends, and taking care of her own happiness. And a surprising thing happened. Her children started calling her more often and began to respect her time. They saw her as a woman with a fulfilling life. The lesson here is simple. The less you depend on your children to feel needed, the better. The more you show that you can stand on your own 2 feet and have a meaningful life outside of them, your children will begin to value your presence more. They will respect you not out of obligation, but because they genuinely admire the life you have built for yourself. Way 4. Establish clear boundaries and enforce them firmly. One of the biggest reasons why children, especially when they are grown, lose respect for their parents is because the parents allow it to happen. If you allow your children to speak to you disrespectfully, dismiss your opinions, or treat you as if your time and feelings don't matter, then that behavior will continue. It's not because they are bad people, but because everyone, especially family, will always treat you the way you allow them to. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting off your children or creating unnecessary conflict. It means calmly and firmly deciding what kind of behavior you will accept and what kind you won't. More importantly, it means consistently enforcing those boundaries when they are crossed. I remember a man named Robert, a retired businessman who had spent his entire life running a company with discipline and confidence. But when he faced his grown children, he struggled to set boundaries. They would frequently interrupt him when he was speaking, dismiss his concerns, and even criticize the way he lived his life. Initially, Robert tried to tolerate it, telling himself it wasn't worth arguing about. But over time, he realized that every time he silently let the disrespect slide, he was teaching his children that that behavior was acceptable. So, one day, Robert decided to change his approach. When his son interrupted him, he calmly said, "You can speak when you are ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he simply replied, "You don't need to be like that with me." As they continued to push his limits, he made it clear that if they didn't treat him with basic respect, he wouldn't spend time with them. And you know what happened? His children started listening. Initially, they might have resisted, but over time, they realized that their dad wasn't going to back down. They saw that their dad valued himself enough to demand respect, and therefore, they started giving it to him. If your children don't respect you, it's time to ask yourself if you are allowing it to happen. Remember, if you don't set boundaries for yourself, they won't do it for you. And if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. Way 5. Stop giving what isn't appreciated. One of the quickest ways to lose someone's respect is to keep giving them things they don't appreciate. As parents, we often do this without even realizing it. We give our time, effort, support, and even money, even when those things are not acknowledged, are taken for granted, or worse, are met with disrespect. But the truth is, when you give what others don't appreciate, you don't build love or respect, you only create an expectation. They start to no longer see your kindness as something valuable, but instead, they see it as something they are entitled to receive. And the moment you stop, they don't feel grateful. Instead, they might feel annoyed or even angry. I once knew a man named George, a father who was always generous and giving to his children. He supported them financially whenever they needed it, readily dropped everything to help them out, and even rearranged his own life to fit their needs. But instead of receiving gratitude, he was often met with complaints and increasing demands. His children rarely said thank you. Instead, they always expected more. The worst part was that when George finally needed his children's help, they were always too busy. Then one day, George decided to make a change. He stopped giving unconditionally. He stopped offering help before someone even needed it, and most importantly, he started learning to say no when he felt it was necessary. Initially, his children were upset and didn't understand why their dad was no longer doing everything for them. But over time, things shifted. They began to appreciate his time and effort more, and they were grateful for what he did for them, because suddenly they realized that their dad's kindness wasn't limitless, it was a precious gift, not something to be taken for granted. If you feel like your children don't respect your time, effort, or kindness, take a step back and ask yourself if you are giving more than you should. And if so, imagine what would happen if you stopped. Because when you teach people that your generosity is contingent on respect, they will start to behave accordingly. Way 6. Build a fulfilling life separate from your children. One of the most powerful ways to regain your children's respect is to show them that your happiness and fulfillment don't entirely depend on them. As parents, we often tend to dedicate our entire lives to our children, making them the center of our universe. But as we grow older and our children become adults, this dynamic needs to change. You've spent your life prioritizing your children, and they might start to see you as someone who has nothing else besides them. People generally respect those who have their own purpose, their own interests and passions, and a sense of inner fulfillment. If your children sense that you rely on them for your joy, validation, or meaning in life, they might start to feel suffocated, or, worse, they might see you as someone who doesn't have a life of their own. I know a woman named Eleanor, a widow in her late 60s. After her husband passed away, she poured all her attention and time into her children. She was constantly calling to check on them, offering unsolicited advice, and it seemed like she expected them to fill the void left by her late husband. But instead of bringing everyone closer, her actions only pushed her children away. They visited less often, phone calls became shorter, and Eleanor felt lonelier than ever. Then one day, Eleanor decided to do something different. She joined a book club, started traveling with friends, and volunteered at a local community center. She no longer made her children the priority in every decision she made. And a wonderful thing happened. Her children started reaching out to her more often. They were curious about what she was doing, and they admired her independence. They began to respect her not just as a mother, but as an independent and interesting individual. If your children don't respect you, ask yourself if they see you as someone with a full and meaningful life, or do they just see you as someone waiting for their attention? Because when you show them that you are truly living your life, not just existing, they will start to see you in a completely different light. Way 7. Cultivate forgiveness and understanding. In any relationship, especially between parents and children, conflicts and hurts are inevitable. Sometimes, children's disrespect can stem from misunderstandings, past hurts, or pressures they are facing in their own lives. Holding on to resentment and bitterness will only further strain the relationship and make it harder to heal. To regain respect, sometimes you need to actively cultivate forgiveness and try to understand your children's perspectives, even if you don't agree with their behavior. This doesn't mean you have to condone or ignore disrespect, but rather that you open your heart to understanding what might be going on in their lives. Try to put yourself in their shoes, listen sincerely to what they have to say, and try to see the issue from their point of view. Forgiveness not only benefits the relationship but also frees you from the negative emotions that are holding you back. When you let go of any resentment, you will feel lighter and be able to approach the relationship with a more positive attitude. This can create a safer and more open space, encouraging your children to also re-examine their behavior and perhaps regret any disrespectful words or actions in the past. Way 8. Seek professional guidance when necessary. In some cases, children's disrespect may stem from deeper issues within the family dynamic or personal problems that both you and your children are facing. If you've tried various approaches and the situation doesn't improve, or if the disrespect is causing significant emotional distress, don't hesitate to seek professional support from a therapist or counselor. An experienced professional can help you and your children explore the root causes of the problem, provide effective tools and strategies to improve communication, and rebuild mutual respect. Family therapy can be a helpful solution for addressing deep-seated conflicts and creating a healthier and more supportive family environment for everyone. Sometimes, having an objective and qualified third party mediate can make a significant difference in healing the rifts in the family relationship. Conclusion: the journey to regaining respect starts with you. Regaining respect from your adult children can be a challenging journey that requires patience and persistent effort. But remember, true change always starts with you. By changing the way you think and act, you can create a positive ripple effect, encouraging your children to see you in a different light. Don't try to force respect. Instead, inspire it through how you treat yourself, how you set boundaries, and how you live a full and meaningful life. Remember, your worth doesn't depend on the approval of others, including your children. You deserve respect simply for being you. Believe in yourself, make the necessary changes, and you will find that over time, the respect you long for will naturally return to you.